Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game and apologises sincerely for not offering a prize for our 3 millionth customer. I'm Kevin Day and he's Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. 3 million, Kieran, that's not bad, is it?
It's gobsmacking. We got very excited when we got to 10,000. I remember from days back gone by. Does this now mean that we'll get an invite to appear on Celebrity Pointless?
I think that's almost guaranteed. I shall put a call in to Richard Osman immediately. That would be great. I'll get double wine in the green room as well because you won't want yours.
Exactly.
I can just imagine us two bickering on Celebrity Pointless. Well, Richard Osman knows you've had an hour to answer this question. Can you just get on, put the mind map away and just pick one of the things from the board. Now, having 3 million downloads may lead you to believe that The Price of Football is a well-oiled machine, competent and professional. Not always. Turns out I've mislaid an email. I'm not sure how you do that, but following recent quizzes, I know there are 3 people out there expecting prizes, namely a book, tickets for a TV show, and a drawing. If that's you, can you please email the usual questions address and I'll rectify that. To the lady in France, your prize is definitely on the way. And don't you people be falsely claiming you're the prize winner because producer Guy is all over that, although I reckon the email issue was his fault in the first place. He disagrees. And people now listening to this for the first time because of the publicity about us getting 3 million downloads will be thinking, how the bloody hell did this pod get 3 million downloads? BAFTA have gone already. They have got to be on the introduction. It's questions day, Kieran, but we do have one news story. And that story is that FIFA are to ban agents from representing players and clubs in the same deal. And judging by the correspondence and communication and conversation we've had with a lot of our listeners, they will be thinking, how was this allowed to happen in the first place?
Yes, and I've been in contact with our agent friend, Jonathan, and he thinks that this is FIFA pushing things a bit, and he's not convinced that it will go through, and that there's likely to be some form of legal redress by people that represent agents. So, we've got friends in the sports law industry, and they will no doubt be looking at the latest 2-week holidays in Courchevel and so on the back of what's happening here. But in terms of dual representation, I can understand some people taking a view that there is a conflict of interest. Players and clubs have historically been quite happy about it because it has, from a taxation point of view, if the agent takes a fee and there's dual representation, then 50% of the fee is taxable by the player and 50% by the club. But if it has to be sole representation, it could mean that the player ends up with a larger tax bill or a larger cost in respect of this, which won't go down well with the players.
Okay, questions. And you remember, Kieran, that I mentioned us being a well-oiled machine. Our first question, I can tell you who it's about. It's about Scunthorpe United, but I can't tell you who it's from because upon rudimentary checking with producer Guy to say, is this question anonymous? It doesn't seem like it's a serious or sensitive enough question to be anonymous. Producer Guy just went, forgot to put the name down. Not in that accent. I don't like to do his Morrissey accent. He said, just read it out next week. But I don't think that's fair, Kieran. I think Scunthorpe United fans have waited long enough for this question to be answered. So this is your question.
Everybody has waited a long time for their question to be answered, to be fair.
That is a fair point,
given that we've got an 800 backlog to work our way through.
Oh, Christ, yeah. Maybe this person's not still with us. Maybe that's why. I can only apologise. We will read your name out twice next week, Mr. Scunthorpe. But the question is this. My local team, as we now ascertained, is Scunthorpe United, has been a financial concern for many supporters, and I wondered what Kieran's thoughts are of our current situation, especially in relation to the owner, Peter Swan. Now, the only thing I recall you telling about Peter Swan, the owner of Scunthorpe, is that he's got nightclubs in Blackpool as well. Is that right?
He has indeed, yes.
Yes, it's terrible that that's the only bit of information my mind retains after the end of each pod.
Yes. Well, looking at Scunthorpe's finances, I think they are fair to say that they are very reliant upon Peter Swan and his Blackpool nightclub, because over the course of the last 5 years, they've been losing £70,000 a week.
A week?
Yeah. So,
Wow.
that's £3.5 million a year, every year. You say, well, how on earth can that be? It's due to the old issue of not being able to control costs. So over the last 8 years, for every £100 that Scunthorpe United had brought in as a football club in terms of revenue, they paid out 143 in wages, which is insanity, from any form of normal business concern. So Peter Swan has effectively been underwriting the losses, and he's been doing this via his company called Cool Silk, which I think is a property and investment company. It's lent the football club over £11 million. Last year, it charged Scunthorpe United Football Club £393,000 in interest on those loans. So he's not doing it for free, although I think it's one of those loans where the interest gets added to the capital. Uncle Terry used to specialise in those, except he would charge interest on a daily basis and get me to do the sums. And that can turn out to be some eye-boggling numbers. And last year, he also acquired the naming rights to Scunthorpe's stadium. And Cool Silk paid £2 million for that. So there's lots of weird numbers roaming around. Now, he's put his money where his mouth is. That can't be denied. We could also say the same about Mel Morris at Derby, and this is always my concern. And this was also the issue with Stuart Day at Bury. He underwrote losses significantly. Then there's either a change of circumstances or a change of heart. And if an owner is allowing a club to lose large amounts of money and personal circumstances change, health changes, or they just think, I'm fed up of this. I'm putting a load of money into the club. I'm getting a load of abuse, as has happened at some clubs. Then they might decide to walk away. And it's that legacy of a club which is losing money. And as we've said on more than one occasion, the vast majority of clubs certainly in the EFL and there's quite a few of them in the Premier League as well, even in non-COVID years, are losing money. They are trophy assets. What happens if you lose interest? What happens if we take the case of Bolton Wanderers, where Eddie Davis put in £175 million and he's sadly passed away, and things can go downhill very rapidly if you're not running it as a sustainable business.
So your love for accountancy came from, as a child, doing the numbers for a South London racket?
Well, yeah, I've always been good at doing numbers in my head. So,
I see,
so Uncle Terry would come round, and because I am I am very odd. I've always had this sort of mental arithmetic shtick. So Uncle Terry would come around and say, so if I lend somebody £30 and charge them 2% a day, and it takes them a month, I could just sort of work out the numbers for him.
Yeah, of course, Uncle Terry not being a man for writing things down for obvious reasons.
Exactly. Yeah. Cash is king.
And just, it turns out, Kieran, amazingly, that not all our listeners are accountancy nerds. A lot of them listen just for the football aspect. And for those people, and of course for me, when you say adding the interest to the capital, isn't that what all loans do? Can you just elaborate on what that means?
Well, what happens in respect of some loans, and these are often referred to PIK loans, or that stands for payment in kind. It's where you charge interest. The interest. So let's say you borrow £100, you're paying 10% interest a month on some, from some dodgy lender, and they charge you 10%, and then you don't pay them anything at the end of month one, and then they charge you another 10% on the 110. So everything gets compounded, and you end up paying far more money than you initially realised.
Got you. Okay, we have two questions about Everton now, and the first one comes from Michael Voldkonig. I apologise, as usual, if I've mispronounced that. Michael, I'm fairly confident with. Michael Voldkonig says, Everton FC have a director of risk and governance. Is this unique in professional football, or do other clubs in England have a risk management function? And what about internal audit? How many clubs have a director of internal audit?
It's the first time I've seen, Michael, a risk or governance director. Clearly, with issues such as financial fair play, with issues with regards to the behaviour of employees, then I think it's useful to have somebody that's perhaps from a legal background, somebody from a governance background, when decisions are being made. So, for example, if we take a look at the naming rights option for Everton, somebody's paid £35 million over a year ago for a naming rights for a stadium which at the time did not even have planning approval. Now, does that £35 million count towards financial fair play? That was absolutely critical because, as we will be finding out fairly shortly, Everton have been going a little bit crazy when it comes to spending money. So the club was in genuine danger of exceeding financial fair play. So a person who has an intricate knowledge of rules, of the governance of the game is absolutely essential because they can advise upon appropriate courses of action to ensure that you don't exceed limits, you don't end up on a charge from the football authorities.
Okay, well, our next question, oddly enough, links directly to that. So kudos to producer guy. Still doesn't make up for missing out the name on the first question. People at home may not hear any of this because he might be editing it himself this week. This could be his week, rather than those several unpaid youngsters that he uses to edit it every time. Interns, that's the word I was looking for. It was a long night. This is Sunday morning. My son Ed came home last night at 1 o'clock, waiting for a phone call from his partner to say when she was going to be home so he could get an Uber, and I decided to stay up with him and watch old football games and highlights. So
terrific.
Yeah, well, it was, but somebody managed to fish a bottle of Jameson out of his back pocket, so not so terrific.
Well, the Baroness has spent the weekend up in Manchester on a gin tour. And apparently this involves having to go around. You're driven around in a large, sort of a large wagon with about a dozen other, I think it's fair to say, cackling ladies who go around to 5 or 6 distilleries and then listen, sort of nodding whilst giggling, while somebody reads out lists of botanicals, and then they get absolutely slammed on the various cocktails on offer. So she phoned me up at a very unusual time of the night, and you first think, "Oh, what are you doing phoning me at that time? Has somebody died?" You think it's a panic, just to tell me that she loved me, which was nice.
I'm welling up. It's a fairly standard sitcom 70s male response. You can't be phoning up to tell me she loves me. Somebody must have died. The reason she'll be hammered is not just the occasional sip of the gin. It will be the drink that's in that large vehicle that's driving them around Manchester as well. The Everton question, which... it's been a while since we asked the last Everton question, so let's just remind people that it leads on from that question. John O'Leary says that as an Everton fan, I've seen lots of money spent in recent years, with a large amount of it going to signings that haven't really worked out. What I want to know is, how does that affect a club's internal finances and FFP when an expensive player leaves on a 3 at the end of their contract? For example, Yannick Bolasie at the end of last season. I feel so sorry for Yannick because he was without a doubt, one of the most exciting talents I've seen at Sellers Park. And it didn't quite work out for him at Everton. But John's quite right. They've had a number of players that they brought in on big money that didn't work out. So how does it work out?
Well, if you take a look at player costs from a club perspective, there's two elements to it. First of all, there's wages. And secondly, there's our very good friend, amortisation. So when Yannick Bolasie was under contract at Everton, the amortisation cost, it cost around, was about 20 million you sold him for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So if that was on a 5-year contract, that would have been a £4 million cost each year, which would have been going against financial fair play. And then his wages as well. And the Everton wage bill has doubled since 2016. And if you add wages and amortisation together, they've gone up from £104 million in 2016 to 264 by the time we got to 2020. So the new owner, Farhad Moshiri, has again, put his money where his mouth is. Going back to Peter Swan, and but benevolent owners are good in the sense that they can increase the quality of the purchases if they are correctly made. If not, if for personal circumstances, or it could be that your style of football doesn't quite fit in, then there's an issue. So when that player's contract expires, you get that you get both of those costs off your FFP calculations, which for Everton's case is absolutely essential. Yeah, they're losing £2.5 million a week, which puts the Scunthorpe £70,000 a week into a different context. And and we are dealing here with owners whose wealth I think it's very difficult to relate to in terms of there's me wondering. When I go to the supermarket getting the cheap food, at 8 o'clock when they reduce the prices. So there's different levels of wealth in play here.
Well, see, as we know, Kieran, a lot of your family monies are going on gin.
Yes,
this doesn't help. So it's not quite so. So Everton fans will say what all fans do, because this has happened to every club.
Yeah.
So Yannick Bolasie, it doesn't work out for him mainly because of a terrible injury that he got early on. Everton fans will say, well, we paid 20 million quid for him, he went on a free transfer, so we've lost 20 million quid, but it's not quite true, is it?
No, because you can recover that in other ways. I think he went out on loan to Middlesbrough for one season, so there'll be a loan fee. Yeah. And also you get the benefit of his service. Now, I appreciate that hasn't worked out, but Lionel Messi left on a free. Cristiano Ronaldo may leave on a free after 2 years at Manchester United, but you still get the opportunity to see these people play. So it's not a lost cost, because if they contribute towards victories, if they contribute towards the entertainment, then that's how it's being consumed.
Now, our next question comes from Andy Barraclough, and the risk, Kieran, of northern stereotyping. I'm going to suggest that Andy Barraclough probably has a similar voice to producer Guy. Sounds to me like Barraclough is the sort of name that will have that soft, gentle, middle-class Manchester accent that hides a rod of iron and refuses you any money. Andy Barraclough says, since the demise of Football Index, I've become an avid listener of your superb pod. Thank you, Andy. I just wanted to know, with the collapse of the Super League, how much worse does it have to get before Barcelona cease to exist? Would this ever be allowed to happen? It's a good question, Kieran, because as each week goes by, we talk about how much more Barcelona are losing money.
Yes, so that their debts are around about 1.1 billion. But I've always said debt in itself is not an issue. Yeah. It's can you service the debt? And the big issue that we've seen at Barcelona is that the club has been hit proportionately more by COVID than perhaps other clubs, certainly clubs in the Premier League, because the Premier League.
Why is that, Kieran? Just because of their size?
The size of the stadium, the fact that they've got the museum there, the fact that they've got conference facilities and so on, and all of that closed down. But it also has to be said, there was spectacular financial mismanagement at Barcelona Football Club over a number of years. And, I know lots of people say, well, Barcelona's fantastic because it's a members only club which has a presidential model. And that's okay. But the trouble is, it results in a series of presidents. If you want to get people to vote for you, you make outlandish promises to them.
Yeah.
And we've seen with Barcelona a series of players who have been signed who frankly have failed to deliver in terms of the costs of acquiring them. So Coutinho, 140 million. Griezmann, another 100 million. They signed him at the age of 28, 29, so they're not going to recover much. They signed Dembele, again, for far more than, well over 100 million. And then you put their wages on top. And all three of those players have been somewhere in the region of mediocre to meh in terms of what they've delivered in terms of the pitch. So there has been financial mismanagement. It has increased the risk. But we also have a saying in business, too big to fail. Now, do you want to be the bank manager who will be forever known as the person who closed down Barcelona Football Club? That can be, you'd have to have cojones of steel to be willing to do that. And then we got this paradox in respect of Barcelona is in that we spoke about this only a few days ago, that they are planning to effectively close the Nou Camp for a year because they want to expand it. And you're thinking, well, that's going to involve more debt. So I think their problems effectively, the lack of revenue problem coincided with an era of vast overspending. We've seen Real Madrid cut back on spending in the last couple of years, and their finances are far better. I think Barcelona's finances will improve. So I don't see that issue of how bad does it have to get, because they are now predicting a break even this year compared to losses of over 400 million last year.
Well, that's good, because I think Andy's question is a valid one.
Yeah.
It is, but we've seen whole countries go bankrupt, Kieran. We've seen huge banks go out of business. There's only so far the finance industry will let any piece of elastic stretch, and at the risk of sounding flippant, you would have to have cojones of steel to bankrupt Barcelona, but at the same time, you're going to get a lot of new accounts from Real Madrid fans, aren't you? So you can't just ceaselessly allow a popular institution to get more and more into debt, can you? Whatever it is.
Yes, and I think that's what we've seen over the course of this summer. Messi did not want to leave Barcelona. Barcelona did not want him to leave, but they had to allow it under the circumstances because they simply couldn't afford to pay him. We will see an exodus. We will see restraint in terms of player recruitment, I suspect, over the course of the next couple of years, and that's how they will be able to redress the financial overhang of the past few years, where they've just simply spent too much money.
Now, our next question comes from somebody I already like him just because of his name, and just because I know that every time his name is read out at assembly, somebody would have made a smart-ass comment, because it's Mark Middling. And it's Mark Middling. I'm going to check where that surname comes from, because it's a great surname. Hopefully Hobbiton. But Mark Middling says that Grimsby Town have become a B Corp as part of their recent takeover. And he's taken the words right out of my mouth. What does that mean?
Yes. Yeah, I thought initially B Corp was sort of one of the names of those 1980s hooligan firms that you associate. There's the infamous F Troop at Millwall. Yeah. There was the 657 crew, which I think came out of Portsmouth, and the Cool Cats at Main Road, and so on. So, blimey, is this? But it turns out to be something different. It's actually it's a kite mark for a company. It doesn't have to be in the football industry, who has been graded as being good on community, environmental governance, the way it treats customers and workers. So
good.
I'm not sure Newcastle, under its present ownership, are likely to be applying for B Corp, for example. So it's the equivalent of the Red Tractor Awards in agriculture, or fair trade for chocolate and coffee and things like that. So Ben and Jerry's innocent smoothies. It's sort of that type of kite marking, and there is something called the B Corp Corporation, which goes round and independently assesses you with regards to this. And they will then say, well, you need to work harder at particular elements. So in a world where I think the behaviour of corporate entities is coming under more scrutiny, you can see the benefits of this. Do B Corp corporations, are they going to be profit maximising to the same extent as some others? I'm not so sure. But then, I think we've established that you don't go into football to make profit unless you're an owner of a Super League club. So it's a different type of organisation. You're still a limited company, but you've been given a gold star.
Right, so what you're saying is that far from there being financial benefits to being a B Corp, you could actually lose a bit of money because it costs you to maintain the standards it takes.
Yes, so right. If you do have a commitment towards communication, transparency, treating your workers in a particular way, then that may come at a financial cost. Alternatively, we've spoken to clubs such as Lincoln, who have a fantastic interface, a really good rapport with the fan base, which means, and it's the same at Accrington and Tranmere and other clubs that we've had contact with. And what you actually find is treat people well, and that can actually come back to be your financial benefit in the longer term, because people feel that there is a genuine relationship, there is a genuine sense of the club is part of the community, and on the back of that, I might buy an extra shirt, or I might bring a couple of friends along because they saying, well, come along to Lincoln because they're really progressive, and so on. So think of it as an investment, and an investment which can have a return both on a non-financial basis in terms of, hey, you're good people, but also good things happen to good people as well, and it can result in if you're having a bad run of form, the fans stick with the club to for a greater period of time because they know that they are good guys.
It's amazing, Kieran, isn't it? You still have to explain to some people that treating people well is the right thing to do. It's especially business. I always think of my granddad's words, God rest his soul. Sometimes it's just nice to be nice.
Exactly.
And well done, Grimsby Towers. I think you're right. Those intangible benefits, I think, are worth a lot. I was going to say you can't I hoist myself by my own petard, but I was about to add that you can't tell how much that is, but that intangible kind of covered that. Our next question comes from Paul Jordan, and Paul says, first off, I must say that your podcast has been a brilliant aid in traversing through COVID. I really hope you both know that, and I am sure that many others are very appreciative of the quality content you're producing that make my Mondays and Thursdays that much better. From what you've heard so far, Paul, your Monday may not have been improved by the quality of some of this content. But we really appreciate your comments, Paul. And we really appreciate the comments of many of you who have taken the time to say similar things. So thank you very much. Paul says, my question, as many other people's questions are, is in relation to financial fair play and how clubs can have remarkable losses and yet still not be penalised under FFP. Kieran posted Aston Villa's accumulated losses on April the 23rd, and it got me thinking, how can the club lose a total of £204 million in 2018, 19, 20 accounts and still not fall foul of FFP?
Well, you have a good accountant. Is the simple answer. But if I expand upon that in certain ways, first of all, you can rack up losses far in excess of the £105 million, which is sort of the headline figure. It's the figure that you'll always see quoted by the media. And the reason for this, first of all, is that there are certain costs which are excluded from financial fair play. And I checked Villa's accounts this morning before we came out, and Villa, I think, are quite cute with regards to this. They actually state exactly how much they invest in their academy. So their academy costs, their community costs, their infrastructure costs. Lots of clubs don't show this, and Villa are sort of one step ahead. They said that their academy is costing them, in the region of £9 to £10 million a year. So over 3 years, that's 30 million, which counts towards is excluded from FFP. Community schemes, their commitment towards the community scheme in 2020 trebled. Fantastic. Hats off to Villa as far as I'm concerned. It was a tough year, especially with the arrival of COVID. So, huge kudos there. So there are certain costs which are excluded. In addition, what you can do, and I alluded to this with regards to the comments about Everton, is that you can have certain one-off benefits. So in the case of Villa, they did sell the stadium to another company owned by the owners. They made some profits on that. I think part of the training facilities ended up being acquired effectively by the government for the new rail scheme. The new rail link between London, Birmingham, and the Northwest.
Yeah.
HS2,
yeah.
That's right. And that gave them more money. So that contributed. And finally, the Premier League itself has said, we're going to slightly relax the FFP rules in the sense that if you have lost money because you've had to play behind closed doors, we'll give you an allowance for that. If you've incurred extra costs because the players have to socially distance, they're in bubbles, there's additional costs of testing, we'll give you an allowance for that. So you throw all of that together, and Villa, in my view, will have sneaked under the 105 million limit. Not by far, but you don't have to do it by far. But that's the type of things that clubs will be looking at very carefully, and having a director of governance, again linking to the Everton question earlier, or loop finder general, as I would probably refer to him as. Then this can allow the clubs to avoid any sanctions from the football authorities.
You enjoyed answering that question, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, just the right amount of detail in there, didn't you? And before people tweet, shall we ascertain that you meant loophole finder general?
Oh yes.
Or
yes.
were you referring to Loop, the early 90s bass heavy Manchester man? And a mate of mine was bass player in.
Oh, was he? Very good.
Yeah, James Endicott. He's heartbreaking looking at the old photographs and looking at him in person now. Time's a terrible thing, isn't it? It was really interesting when I met him, and I met him through a mutual friend about 10 years ago, and somebody, he's a bass player in a band. And I went, what? Oh, which band? He went, Loop, and he could see that my face fell because I was never a fan.
Ah.
And I'd say, no, I loved him. He went, what was your favourite song? I went, you got me. Now, Kieran, I try and respect people as much as possible by getting their names right. But this name is proof that even 5 simple letters can contain many hurdles. I'm going to go for Andrew Flood, but it could be Andrew Floud. It could even be Andrew Flood. I don't know. It's Floud. So, Andrew, again, I apologise. But Andrew Flood's question is an interesting one, Kieran, because it mentions something that is increasingly talked about in football commentaries as players having a background or at least expertise in this particular sport, of which I have very little knowledge. And Andrew's question is, I watched the UEFA Futsal Champions League on BT Sport earlier this year. You didn't have to tell us where you watched it, Andrew, but we'll throw in that extra bit of publicity for them. It might help in their huge sell-off to an Italian company whose name we can't properly pronounce. But anyway, Andrew watched the UEFA Futsal Champions League, which was won by Sporting Lisbon against Barcelona. And I was wondering the following: is there a reason Premier League and other major European clubs don't put in teams? Would there be much money to be made by winning the competition? And is there much commercial value to the competition for the clubs taking part? So we do hear increasingly, Kieran, of other versions of football, cage football, all sorts of 5, 7, 9-a-side football. So it's an interesting question, this.
Yes, and it is sanctioned by both FIFA and UEFA. So there is an acknowledgement that futsal is, is part. It comes under the umbrella of what we see as football. I think that part of the problem is that it is very popular in some countries, but it's not. It doesn't have that universal appeal presently that football does have. So places such as Brazil and Spain and Portugal. It goes down and attracts a big audience. But then, if I go back to Ireland, hurling and Gaelic football, the crowds they get there, and you go to Southern Hemisphere, you got Aussie rules. There are certain sports which are localised, a bit like stool ball in Sussex, of course.
We haven't got time to go through that explanation again, Kieran, of how stool ball. But suffice to say, only in Sussex.
Yes. The reason why Premier League clubs at present don't show much interest in it is that the skills required are very similar to those of traditional football. So futsal, it's an indoor game of football. It's played with a heavier, sort of less bouncy ball. On a hard surface, the emphasis is very much on dribbling. Well, those skills are the skills you'd also associate with football itself. So the chances are that the sport, to a certain extent, chooses you. If you are a very good footballer and you're given a choice between futsal or football, you're going to choose the latter because it pays more. So it's ultimately it's driven by money. As far as the UEFA competition is concerned, I think this year's futsal championship, they've got 55 clubs from 51 countries. So there's certainly an interest in it. The average wages for this sort of the senior clubs, I think they're probably only around about 20 grand a year. So it's not going to it's not going to attract people to switch codes. Although I understand that the best player of futsal, who is called Ricardinho, which I presume is Brazilian, he is the first $1 million player a year. So it's a case of building up an interest for it. I think it could be similar to the big clubs seeing this, if they have the facilities to play it, and also the fact that it's an indoor sport and it is five-a-side, then that has implications for the maximum number of people that can watch it, because it's going to be only at certain locations. Yeah. So I think there are sort of intrinsic challenges in terms of its availability, but we are seeing the rise of esports and clubs trying to associate themselves with FIFA, the electronic arts game, and this could be a way of generating more money on a longer term, but I think it's got a long way to go first.
When I was a kid, Kieran, in the 70s, I used to love the Evening Standard London five-a-side tournament. Used to love it. And the reason I used to love it, apart from the fact there was a bit of football on telly, was I used to lose my shit seeing players in plimsolls. I just they were in plimsolls like we were at school. The only thing that ruined it was my dad shouting periodically, "Watford's not in London." It's very unpredictable, the things that used to irritate my dad. But if the big match was on, if Brian Moore said, "Today we've got Watford," oh God, I used to have to try and turn the telly down before my dad heard, "Watford's not in London. They haven't got red buses." There's other criteria, Dad. But anyway, Duncan Martin, that's the other thing. So their local derby's Luton, and Luton's definitely not in London. So how can they be in London?
According to the airlines, it is.
That's a fair point, yeah, but according to the airline, so is Geneva. One airline in particular. Well, I'm flying Ryanair to London, Geneva. I'll walk the rest of the way then. Duncan Martin has our next question. And Duncan says, I listen to the pod religiously as soon as it is available. And Duncan, as a comedian, I feel honour bound to say, why are you listening to it kneeling down? The universe wouldn't allow me to sleep if I didn't say that, Duncan. But thank you for saying that, Duncan. It's very kind of you. I'm going to say it again. Duncan says, I listen to the pod religiously as soon as it is available. And I finally have a question to ask, which is lovely. Now, Duncan has started off with a lovely, lovely compliment there. He's lured us in as he's doing the old bait and switch, because the next part of his question says, Swiss Ramble...
Oh, who refuses to come on the show.
Have we asked him?
Yeah, I've asked him loads of times.
Have we?
Yeah.
Why? Why do we want him on?
Well, I want to learn from the master.
I have trouble enough keeping up with you. How am I supposed to listen to... I'm not going to be able to come up with questions clever enough to keep Swiss Ramble involved. How can we... If we can't afford Swiss Ramble?
That's true. We can pay him in Toblerone.
I wonder what the exchange rate is at the moment between the pound and Toblerone. Anyway, Duncan says Swiss Ramble have we ever got through a question, do you think, Kieran, about getting distracted?
No.
Well, here we go. Now being distracted by being distracted. Swiss Ramble wrote a Twitter thread about the finances of the Dirty Dozen recently. The summary, as far as I can tell, is that City and Chelsea have no issues. Man United and Liverpool are okay, and everyone else is broke or worse. Now, is this a consequence of financial fair play failing to have teeth and allowing the state oligarch-owned clubs to buy success? Are UEFA going to revisit it? And this is the part of the question that many people echo. Have they given up? And if so, does this make further schisms like the Super League inevitable?
Right. I mean, in terms of Duncan's comment about the oligarch stroke petro-owned clubs buying success, I think success has been bought in football forever. Yeah, if you take a look, I mean, I did an analysis of every club that had won the Premier League a few months ago, and with the incredible exception of Leicester City. The club that was paying either the highest or the second highest wages won the Premier League practically every season. So money talks in football, and the Premier League and the Champions League, I think, are a reflection of that. So in terms of the non-Premier League clubs, again, sort of harking back to an earlier question, they have been hit to a greater extent than clubs in the Premier League, because the Premier League has this cushion of this amazing TV deal. But certainly those in Spain and Italy have suffered as a result of COVID to a greater extent. Part of that is down to financial mismanagement, because if you listen to Florentino Perez of Real Madrid talk, his view is that Real Madrid should be winning the Champions League on an annual basis. And anything which comes to challenge that, he feels is therefore morally and ethically wrong. But going back to UEFA and FFP, it looks as if financial fair play as we know it, they are going to throw in the towel. It has been partially successful in my view, in the sense that clubs such as Chelsea and Manchester City, they don't have the biggest wage bills in football in Europe. I think actually they just tend to spend their money better. They have a better strategy than some of the other clubs, and they've not spaffed it against a wall, as our Prime Minister would possibly describe it as. But it looks like the proposals from UEFA is that financial fair play, which is based on profitability, and the thing is about profit. Profit is an abstract concept, and therefore trying to nail things down when you're dealing with an abstract is very difficult. Is going to be replaced by saying that clubs can only spend a certain amount of their income on wages. And if you exceed that, you will be subject to a super tax. So let's say that let's say we've got a 70% limit. If you generate 100 million a year, you can only spend 70 million on wages. If you choose to pay 80 million on wages, you're 10 million above, and you've got to pay, I think it's a pound for pound or a euro for euro basis. So you'd have to go and pay 10 million extra in wages. You've then got to go and pay 10 million to UEFA, which they will then distribute amongst the rest of the, and I quote, football family. And so therefore that will help to equate. So those clubs who are being funded by new owners who want to spend more money can do so, but that will come at a price. How does that address the issue of the oligarch or the petro-funded clubs? They'll just, in theory, they can go and spend as much as they want, provided they're prepared to pay the tax. My concern is that there are, the first thing I would do is I'd start to look for the loopholes, and I wouldn't necessarily pay the players as much, but I would set up parallel contracts with sponsors who, they've got a player who wants 300 grand a week. We're going to pay tax on that, pay him 200 grand a week, and get one of the sponsors to pay him 100 grand a week as an ambassador for that company. Provided you've got a friendly sponsor, and of course many clubs do, then you can end up with the worst of both worlds.
Interesting to hear, Kieran, that your answer to the question, have they given up, is essentially yes for now on this version of FFP. But it's even more interesting that Duncan asked it, because I think one of the reasons this pod continues is that you talk to many, many football fans and they all say, well, they've given up. UEFA, they don't enforce it because it's quite clear that it's not stopping the 7 or 8 richest clubs in Europe from consistently being the teams that contest the Champions League final. But the problem is, even if you go back to the 60s and 70s, which we talk about with rose-tinted glasses so often, it's still, yes, Derby won it and Forest won it, but for the most part, it's still the wealthiest clubs in the leagues. And from the 80s onwards, it's, how many times did Liverpool win it? It was the clubs with the biggest fan base and the biggest budget. So money's always spoken in football, Kieran. We know that. If you go back in history to the start of the Football League, money's always spoken. And, the teams like Villa were very influential because they were very wealthy, back in 1888 and so on. So, anyway, Duncan, thank you for listening to the pod religiously, and thank you for your question. Give our regards to Swiss Ramble next time you like one of his tweets. And our final question comes from Quentin Soldan, who's a friend of the pod. And this is one of those questions, Kieran, when I first read it, I just thought, well, that can't be right. But I think he is right. If players' wages continue to rise in line with TV income, surely this will negate the chance of any club making a profit, and ultimately could mean many going out of business. That actually seems to have a logic to me, bearing in mind that I have no financial brain at all. But if all that happens with TV money going up is that clubs just push the wage bill up, that does seem to make sense.
He's absolutely right. If you go back, and I went back to the very first year of the Premier League, and I dug out all of the financial records of the club. Since then, the income of clubs in the Premier League has increased by 2,400%. A huge amount of money. Congratulations. Yeah. The Premier League is a fantastic product. Yeah. It compared to the other big five, the other members of what we referred to as the big 5 leagues in Europe. It's the unpredictability, the enthusiasm of the people attending. It's the quality of the football. You've only got to drop down a few divisions to see that the quality of the football in the Premier League is phenomenal.
Kieran, I mean, just watching Match of the Day last night, just game after game of high-quality, entertaining, high-scoring football, right until that dreadful, terrible, shocking. How did they get 2 minutes of highlights out of that game?
Yes, Alan Shearer and Gary Lineker both, Mark Chapman both looked embarrassed. I'm just glad I wasn't allowed to go to the match, because I had to look after Finlay because the Baroness had gone on her gin tour.
Yes, I know.
Saved by the gin.
What a nightmare for you that must have been, being on your own in the house just with Finlay. Well, Finlay's great because you've taught him to hold your spreadsheet down, haven't you?
Exactly. So the income of clubs in the Premier League has gone up by 2,400%, but wages have gone up by 2,800%, which even producer Guy would say that's more money than he's made over that period.
Yeah.
So Quentin's absolutely right. Various attempts to cut back on wage inflation simply haven't worked. I have a cunning plan called "Just Say No" when somebody asks for more money, but that doesn't appear to work. Even in a world in which 3-word slogans appear to be how all government policy is decided these days. He's absolutely right. If more money comes into the game and there is no serious attempt at cost control, that continued risk. So it doesn't matter what you do. If you shift more money from the Premier League to the EFL, they're just going to spend it. If we set up the Super League, and one of the rules of the Super League was that you can only spend 55% of your income on wages, somebody will find out a way around it. Where there's a will, there's a way. And ultimately, it's because the culture of football, in terms of the way that it negotiates with players, is determined at the very top by club owners. And many of them are not interested in a financial return solely. And whilst we have a variety of owners and objectives, getting around the rules will be part of the game.
I'm glad you said that Quentin is right, because we ascertained quite firmly that I agreed with Quentin before you answered the question. So therefore, you're also saying that I'm right.
Absolutely.
That doesn't happen very often. And your just say no theory is absolutely right. The problem is that every club has to adopt that theory, because it's all very well. We mentioned a couple of pods ago that Palace missed out on signing Tim Cahill because Simon Jordan wouldn't pay his agent's fee, which Palace fans agreed with, right up to the point where Tim Cahill signed for another club who would pay his agent fee. And, all that a player will say is, if Club X says, no, we're not paying those wages, he's got Club A to Y to go and who will do it, is the problem, isn't it? And And this, of course, is why ex-professional footballers who didn't earn that amount of money are still going about, well, it's the players running the game now. Yep. But it is. It always has been to an extent, but it certainly is now. Thank you to everyone who's made a donation to our pod via our Patreon site, which includes Basil, Paul Watkinson, Aaron Franklin, Gary White and Clive Hill. I tried to leave a break there between Basil and Paul Watkinson in case people thought it was somebody called Basil Paul Watkinson, but it's Basil and then Paul Watkinson. And now I'll say the others again because that wouldn't be fair. Aaron Franklin, Gary White and Clive Hill. If you would like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod, go to patreon.com/price of football. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, or you're the bloke from Scunthorpe who wants to remind us of his name, or we owe you a prize, then email us at questions@priceoffootball.com, and I shall hand you over to Kieran Maguire in his unusually quiet house for his customary farewell.
Well, once again, folks, thank you very much for the support. We are genuinely touched at the fact that we've managed to have 3 million downloads, and B, what appears to be an outpouring of affection for the show as well, which is tough. I know some of you said that it helped you during lockdown. I'll be honest, I'm speaking on behalf of both of us. It helped myself and Kevin during lockdown as well, because it gave us a sense of purpose, a sense of of actually knowing what day of the week it was. So it's genuinely been beneficial for us as well. If you want to support the show, Patreon is one vehicle. But if you just want to get some good karma from us, go to that big Apple purple icon, and if you could give us 5 stars, if you could give us a review, doesn't matter what you say. By all accounts, according to Producer Byte, it helps us when we're trying to persuade people to come on the show as guests. You could say you would rather it was presented by Alan Sugar and Susie Sue, and I'd listen to that.
I'd listen to that. It wouldn't be on for long, but I'd listen to it.
But it does help us from a business point of view. So other than that, stay safe, look after yourselves, and love to everyone.
I've met both of those people. Let's just say that one of them is much nicer than the other. The one from Bromley. That's the only clue I'll give you. And I'm guessing, Kieran, that if there's anybody who currently doesn't know what day of the week it is, it's probably the Baroness.
Yes.
Hopefully by the time she gets home.
Yes, I think she's on a train, probably regaling passengers with telling them how wonderful the Manchester Gin Tour is, and talking botanicals at great length.
No, she'll be on the train saying, "Don't you know who I am? Do you know who I'm married to? I'm married to Kieran Maguire. That's who I'm married to. I'm staying in first class." Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.